we obtained a massive victory from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, finding that the counting of ballots received after Election Day is contrary to federal law. As I talked about, our election law team is second to none. In this case, Russ Nobile, one of our lawyers, was leading this case. We obtained a massive victory from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, finding that the counting of ballots received after Election Day is contrary to federal law. Massive victory. It may not be imposed on Mississippi, which is the state that was counting the ballots after Election Day for 5 days, received after Election Day. 5 days after Election Day, they were still going to be able to take ballots in and count them. But it's a massive victory in terms of, for the first time, an appellate court has found what I think is an obvious point, that Election Day means Election Day. And we've done an animated video kind of highlighting and explaining what the issue's about. So let's run this.
Some states allow votes to be received and counted after Election Day, in violation of existing election law. Federal law says the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November of every even-numbered year is Election Day for federal elections. Extending the counting of ballots runs counter to federal law and invites fraud and undermines voter confidence. Right now, Judicial Watch is suing Illinois and Mississippi for allowing ballots to be received and counted days and weeks after Election Day if the ballots are dated on or before Election Day. As you can see, Judicial Watch is hard at work ensuring our elections are fair and honest. And you can be assured we are ready to do the heavy lifting to make sure they stay that way, because no one is above the law.
So isn't that great? We're out there educating folks, and then we get this key victory on the Fifth Circuit. And, we've been pushing this issue for years. We filed really the first comprehensive lawsuit. I think there were issues about this in 2020, but we really got it perfected in terms of what the legal argument would be in our lawsuit filed against Illinois in 2022. Now that case is on hold because the courts found that candidates don't have standing to challenge the potential illegal counting of ballots, which makes no sense. It's absurd, and the court should be a little bit ashamed of running an argument like that. Now, Mississippi, the lower court found against us on the merits. They thought federal law didn't prohibit it. And as I highlighted there, it's kind of an easy call, isn't it? So the Fifth Circuit decision was really a dramatic victory for those of us concerned about getting back to the idea of an election day and having the law that requires an election day be vindicated. Because when you count ballots that arrive after Election Day, not only is it contrary to federal law, as the Fifth Circuit has affirmed at least, but it requires, it's an opportunity for voter fraud and undermines voter confidence. Now, our client in Mississippi was the Libertarian Party of Mississippi, and I'd like to thank them for pursuing justice here. The other plaintiff in the case was the Republican National Committee. Of course, the left intervened to try to stop us down there. They lost. So it's not just the state we sue. We end up having to sue leftists because they intervene to be defendants in the cases sometimes on these election law issues. Part of the opinion reads, Congress statutorily designated a singular day for the election of members of Congress and the appointment of presidential electors. Text, precedent, and historical practice confirm this day for the election is the day by which ballots must be both cast by voters and received by state officials. Because Mississippi's statute allows ballot receipt up to 5 days after the federal election day, it is preempted by federal law. We reverse the district court's contrary judgment and remand for further proceeding. There's something else I wanted to read from here. The state's problem, and this is I encourage you to read the decision. It's educational. The court cites or references, it doesn't necessarily give us the credit, but references many of the arguments and details on the history of election law and our elections in the United States uncovered by our litigation team. So this is a Judicial Watch opinion through and through, in my view. The state's problem is that it thinks a ballot can be cast before it is received. So the government was saying, Mississippi was saying, oh, it doesn't matter if we get the ballots 5 days after Election Day because effectively the vote occurs before Election Day. Meaning it's postmarked, it means that's when the vote occurred. And it's been cast. And the court said, well, that's ridiculous. And here's their example. What if a state changes its law to allow voters to mark their ballots and place them in a drawer? Or what if a state allowed a voter to mark a ballot and then post a picture on social media? The hypotheticals are obviously absurd, but it should be equally obvious that a ballot is cast when the state takes custody of it. And the court made the point that the election is continuing if votes are, quote, being cast and received after Election Day, which is contrary to the plain reading of the federal law at issue there. And so it goes through the history of voting, the history of mail-in ballots or absentee ballots. Of course, a lot of this stuff would be obviated if there was, we got back to the traditional approach on absentee ballots, which was essentially making it rare. I mean, mail-in balloting is anathema, as I said before, to fair and free elections, and it causes issues like this. But what a victory. And it's difficult to overstate how important it is. Now, the question is, well, is it going to apply to this election? It's unlikely given what the court found here. And they reference a Supreme Court decision that, it's called the Purcell Doctrine. The Purcell Doctrine generally frowns upon messing with election processes in the run-up or close to an election. And so they basically told the lower court, keep this case going because there's a point here that Judicial Watch and others are making, but don't mess with the next election. But on the other hand, this issue is going to be a big debate even in this election. Because we've all been told that it's normal for the 18 or 19 states that do it to count ballots received after Election Day. And it ain't normal. And according to the Fifth Circuit, it's contrary to federal law. Now, the Fifth Circuit, I think their states in the Fifth Circuit are only, is it Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas? But certainly, it's going to be used and considered in other states as well in other challenges. As Justice Kavanaugh, this is the final part of the decision. As Justice Kavanaugh recently emphasized, to state the obvious, a state cannot conduct an election without deadlines. A deadline is not unconstitutional merely because of voters' own failures to take timely steps to secure the franchise. Federal law requires voters to take timely steps to vote by Election Day, and federal law does not permit the state of Mississippi to extend the period for voting by 1 day, 5 days, or 100 days. The state's contrary law is preempted. So this is a great decision. I mean, it's everything that Judicial Watch has been saying about this for years. Now, I think it's a little bit wrong. You want to hear where I think it's wrong? In the decision, the court says, well, this doesn't mean they can't count ballots past Election Day that have been received by Election Day. And I would say that's contrary to the law that they cite here, too. If there's no deadline by which states need to count ballots, what good is having an Election Day? I mean, we saw in 2020, for the first time in American history, at least modern history, we had election results that were not obtained that told Americans, practically speaking, who won. In fact, the vote totals at the time showed that Trump won, and it was days before we found out who the winner was. Maricopa County, they announced it's going to take them 13 days to figure out the votes. Texas, right now, they count ballots that arrive up to the day after Election Day. So that, Georgia, Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, said they may not know the winner until 3 days after Election Day because they count votes, according to this decision, illegally, up till Friday. They allow overseas ballots to come in up to 3 days past Election Day. There's no provision in federal law for that. So I would submit that counting ballots received after Election Day obviously is illicit. The Fifth Circuit agrees with me on that. They don't agree, and I don't know if they don't agree in the sense that it's a finding as opposed to dicta, meaning a passing reference that doesn't really provide any substantial legal guidance or precedence. I mean, under that theory, maybe they can count ballots forever. It just never stops. I mean, think of congressional fights where you have disputes about congressional outcomes, right? And it's up to the House or the Senate to decide, and it's happened before, who gets to be seated. I mean, think of if there's no, quote, deadline for counting ballots, that would be an inducement to just keep the election open, practically speaking. I mean, I think when federal law says you need to choose the electors on Election Day, that means you got to choose the winner and document it. And don't tell me it can't be done. Of course it can be done. Now, does it mean you don't calculate votes afterwards? Yes, but if the calculation of votes afterwards, there's votes that are provisional ballots and such like that, to the degree provisional ballots can be counted post-Election Day, there has to be justification for that in federal law. And the states are playing fast and loose with Election Day, and I think it's undermining election confidence. So I don't want to get distracted too much on this issue, but it could be a big issue in 2024 again, because I don't think ballot counting should extend past Election Day, as it's happened, they're planning to do in Michigan, how they're planning to do in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, in Georgia. And certainly this decision. And I think we're going to share it with all the 19 states that do it. Whether we sue there or not is another matter. But all the states should be on notice, and you should find out whether your state allows the counting of ballots after Election Day. And this could be a nice little activist opportunity for you, dear listener, dear viewer. Look at this first Fifth Circuit opinion. It's linked on our website. We'll link it below. And send it to the responsible officials in your state. Send it to your state legislator. Send it to your, or legislators, right? I guess some states have assemblies and senates and houses. I think there's 1 or 2 states with a unicameral body. So whoever your state representatives are, send it to the governor and send it to the leading election official, which in most states is the Secretary of State, and say, why is our law at odds with the logic in this decision? It means in Texas too. Texas needs to fix its law now. So that's nice little activism for you all to do. Demand that they stop counting ballots received in the least after Election Day. And you'll read in this decision the logic is irrefutable. Irrefutable. It's a great, and they don't want us, to and I just want to say something else, because I was about to get into the censorship of our talking about this. Because I sometimes don't praise Judicial Watch enough. So our election law work has been going on for, well over a decade. I mean, actually more than that, 2 decades. Did you know in the year 2000, I was down in Florida with other Judicial Watch colleagues and a Judicial Watch team generally, counting ballots that were disputed in the 2000 election in Bush versus Gore? Do you know that? So we've been monitoring and dealing with election law issues for 2.5 decades here at Judicial Watch. So there are few organizations with more expertise and experience and knowledge and awareness of election issues than your Judicial Watch. And not only do we have these lawsuits, including this massively successive lawsuit in the Fifth Circuit, but we have lawsuits that have been successful over the years and other litigation, legal action to clean up the election rolls. 4 million names cleaned from the election rolls in just the last year and a half or two. We just filed a lawsuit in Oregon to clean the rolls there, as I talked about last week. And so I know the RNC has been suing on some of these issues now, which is fine. And other groups have been suing on some of these issues now, like, for instance, our friends, I think it's at American First Legal, sued in Arizona for the list of names of voters who were found to be ineligible potentially to vote in federal elections, if I think I'm describing it correctly. Nice little victory there. So I'm glad there are other groups doing it. But respectfully to everyone else, there's no one that can match our expertise in this regard. There really isn't. And our demonstrated record of success, certainly on election law issues. So it's important that we are able to continue this work, and frankly, we only do it with your support. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.